All right, welcome everybody to our Wednesday Zoom and Learn. Today, Mary Jane is going to be covering no more buyer's letters. That's what it was titled, right? No more buyer's letters.
Yep, fair housing.
Yeah, fair housing laws don't like the fact that agents are sending out buyer's letters to the sellers. So Mary Jane's going to cover the ins and outs of that, how it came to be, why, what can happen if you do it, all that good stuff. And if you guys have questions, hopefully we'll have answers. And so I thank you for coming. I'm Tommy with California Title Company. And my co-host is Mary Jane Morris
with Granite Escrow. Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. I am the VP of Sales for Granite Escrow for the Temecula and Riverside Valley. I am a retired non-competing broker for many, many years here in the Valley, and I was hired specifically by Granite to bring you broker level subjects and solutions that a regular escrow company might not be able to give you. And so I am fortunate to team up with Tommy and have an opportunity to talk to you guys every week about the subjects that are fresh on our mind or that need addressing. So today, the rule came out, or recently the rule came out that there are to be no more buyer's letters. And so we're meaning the love letters that a buyer sends with his purchase contract, trying to personalize his offer, not intending to create any sort of discrimination against or for himself or against or for someone else, meaning they appear to be neutral when in fact they may turn out not to be and cause you and your client a problem. So today we're going to be talking about buyer's letters, accompanying offers, and the results of those letters. And I'm going to start with a little background. So in the last couple of years, I put the link in the chat. Newsday did a study, very thorough. More than 5,000 agents and buyers and sellers were interviewed or for hiring them or choosing them as their agent on camera in more than 5,000 incidences over close to 4 or 5 years. I put that link in there because many of those videos are in there so that you don't have to believe for yourself whether somebody was being discriminatory or not. But the results really shook the industry. It indicated that that there is a high likelihood that if a person is not like you or someone you're not comfortable with or of a race or of a protected class, that either you or your client isn't in favor of, or worse yet, favors more strongly than others, that the real estate industry got a very low rating. It was almost an F rating for failure to avoid discrimination and many of these were neutral things where maybe you just didn't speak that language and you somehow brushed them off, or you didn't like that they were a Habib, or that they were a gay couple, or single moms, even things that you would think might be favorably looked at are sometimes by conscious or unconscious bias cause us to choose or not choose somebody for the purchase of a home. So on October 1, we got a new form, the FHDA, which is the Fair Housing Discrimination Act. It has now been bundled with 21 documents on zip forms, everything from all your buyer brokers, all your listing agreements, your RPAs, your compensation agreements, leasing documents. It has been added in there. And it seems like one more bit of protection. A general sort of protection that we don't have to be aware of. But because it specifically turns down buyer's letters or recommends against them, this has become a bigger subject. As I listened to the CAR class last week and the attorneys there, and I'll have some opportunity to practice it myself here today, when we're discussing certain classes and that sort of thing, You know that this year has been a big year for fair treatment of perceived or realistically perceived persecuted groups in the community. That plus the very bad rating agents got for fair housing in the Newsday study, and there was another study that followed up that, and I can't think of what it is right now, but there are 2 studies out there if you Google them. This CAR decided this was the year that we needed to make fair housing an issue. So let's talk about what a buyer's letter is. I think we're all pretty familiar that it's a love letter of some sort. They're personal. They often have a cute little picture of their puppy or their baby or their mother living with them or whatever the situation is. They are intended to personalize and have you maybe feel like you know that person better. But it unfortunately may cause bias in the other direction, which is perhaps you're of a particular religion that finds single mothers to have been at blame for some reason they became single, or you think that your home is not a great home for somebody in a wheelchair because you have lots of steps. Perhaps you think your home is better for the person who's of the same religion as you because the church is just a couple of doors down. Perhaps you imagine your family style home with four bedrooms and 2 baths to be great for a large family. A family now looks very different. It's very often that it could be 2 dads, it could be 2 moms, it could be the grandparents raising the kids, it could be a completely different situation than you might be imagining in your own mind. Some people occasionally will throw in a perk on these letters, a lifetime supply of Skittles, that sort of thing. So we would also happily buy all the furniture, something like that isn't a term of your contract. The problem with these letters is they often reveal a protected class, that they are a protected class of, and again, they may not always work for you. So one of the transaction coordinators, she may be online here with us today, reached out to me this week and indicated that her situation was a single mom and she had worked very hard to save enough money and she really wanted to show them what she was made of. And I replied that it's just as easy if they could think something against her regarding being a single mom as it would be for her to benefit. So we're trying to get back to terms. A sales price and terms are what sells or what are supposed to sell properties, not who you want to live there or who you don't want to live there. Let's talk about bias. First of all, we all have a bias. Some of us don't like dark chocolate. Some of us don't eat Brussels sprouts. Some of us, we all have our biases. We assume that these people, that whoever we're for or against are similar or different than us. There's an assumption made that they are better or worse than that. Thoughts and images may come to your mind about a prior experience you had with a person of that situation. Carr made a point of saying that realtors see quite a bit of these categories. I remember when I was an escrow officer and gay marriage in purchasing started to be a thing, and we had to start writing husband and husband as joint tenants or wife and wife as joint tenants. We were among the very first people to see that approximately 20% of home buyers at that time were gay couples. So we have a lot of opportunity to see these Carr says that this bias is so fundamental in us that it is literally a caveman thing, when you would have to very quickly sum up a situation to decide if you were in some danger or not. And although we're not being chased around by wildebeests anymore, this sensation of deciding if this is a good place to be or a bad place to be, or if you're close to somebody you don't want to be, and that sort of thing, is literally that level. Bias is built into us originally as a safety feature, and now unfortunately will need to be reined in as there's not just married and unmarried. There's not just women and men anymore. There are so many categories. So I wanted to, at the top of this fair housing discrimination form, I wanted to, it restates that the laws that you are defending in this case are in 2A, B, C, D, and E. Some of them you will remember from your original licensing class, the UNRU, California Code. And then paragraph 3 talks about violations of fair housing. This was a question that came to at the end of the CAR class that I just tuned myself up on. Somebody posted the question, well, what can they really do to us if we, what really are the penalties for this sort of thing? So the CAR attorney went on to say that there are federal laws that you may be breaking that literally could involve a criminal offense or a felony. There are state laws that might be in the same way. Fair housing is a code of ethics violation that might also, and then in certain circumstances, especially if it goes up against one of the federal or county or state laws, your Department of Real Estate is going to get involved, and it may affect your license that way. So there are many ways that not looking out for fair housing can backfire on you, although it feels very routine in our daily life. So paragraph 4 has the protected classes. There are now, I believe, are 20 of them: race, color, ancestry, national origin, religion, sex, meaning male or female, sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression. I noticed the other day that Facebook has over 100 choices for gender at this point, depending on which way you feel, whatever percentage you feel is your situation. Marital status, family status, source of income, disabilities, medical conditions, citizenship, whatever their primary language is, whatever their immigration status is, their military or veteran status, their age, criminal history, which is non-relevant, certain non-relevant convictions, and any arbitrary characteristic that you just don't like their face, as opposed to the terms of their offer. California Association of Realtors plus the National Association of Realtors in paragraph 5 reminds you that we all are trained regularly in our continuing education. And then paragraph 6, I highlighted there that it's the NAR's Code of Ethics that prohibits article, I'm sorry, let me try that again. The National Association Code of Ethics, Article 10, prohibits discrimination. And then who's required to comply with fair housing? Sellers, licensees, mobile home parks, insurance companies, landlords, brokerages, homeowner associations, governments, sublessors, property managers, banks, and mortgage companies. So some of the things that you might be unaware of that cause you to have a bias. A flag flying outside of a home may indicate to you that a person is or is not something. A political sign in their yard would indicate to you that perhaps you wouldn't want that person necessarily next door, or if you saw a ramp leading up to the door, you might assume a handicapped person lived there, or a sign to leave shoes at the door. It's very common in certain races that they take their shoes off faithfully, and you may be aware of that and accidentally pick up an unconscious opinion about that. A Prius, an SUV, a beat up Corolla, that all of those kinds of things are triggers in our minds for the kinds of things that cause bias. Covered that. We covered this. Let's see. So one of the questions that came up is if the federal or local laws are in recently under the current administration, federal fair housing laws have been eased while state fair housing laws have gone up, have gotten stronger. So the law says that when two laws are in competing versus federal or local, whichever one is the strongest, whichever one offers the most protection is the one that should be followed. So you can't pick the lowest bottom of the barrel situation. You have to pick you have to follow the most quality law that gives the most quality protections. Straight up, are letters now illegal? They are not. They are frowned upon, they are discouraged, and I'm going to teach you on how the CAR wants them handled going forward. So the reason you want to discourage them as either a seller or a buyer is to discourage the impression of impropriety. CAR is asking that when you take a listing, you now discuss with your seller and show in the MLS whether you are accepting buyer's letters or not accepting buyer's letters. And they're asking that whatever you do across the board. So they don't want you soliciting them. They don't, and if they come over, if the seller has given you permission, because you've had this discussion, they want you to open up that attachment and remove it from the package. They do not want it to go to the seller if, and then they talked a lot about when you have these kind of conversations with your seller, might it be perceived that you're accusing them of something? It's just, again, one of those smooth talking kinds of things you need to do that say it's become an issue. And the way that we avoid that issue is not looking at their cute puppy and not looking at their children and not making our decisions based on those letters. They would like to see it in the MLS going forward. I assume in the confidential remarks, because that would not be a public remark. I'm guessing from what we've learned from the CRMLS previous classes that would be a confidential remark. If your buyer wants to submit a letter, you must find out whether the seller even wants one. And the easiest way to do this is by the MLS. And if they, that they must not, you must warn them again that they must not focus on anything that has to do with any protected class. So even number of occupancy, a couple examples they gave were people who are renting rooms who say women only, for instance. That is a violation of the fair housing now. Similar example, 2 people only. That is a occupancy violation. The only people who can make anything close to those decisions are people who live in that home as well. When a homeowner rents a room in his own house, he has a little more freedom to decide what's going to be working for his family. But for general renting status, you cannot get into any of those, whether they're married, what kind of work they have, the type, if they're an advocate for your favorite political guy today, and you want to shut that down, that is not a good decision making. They're asking that your brokerage please make a plan about what you guys are going to do and do it across the board. Do not allow one letter here and one letter there and then not let other people's letters come in. Some of us here are old enough to somewhat remember, or at least be closer to the days of redlining and steering neighbors away from a black neighborhood or steering them into a poorer part of town if they believe that's where they belong, that sort of thing. Steering is not so far behind us that it isn't, that its roots are still part of the Fair Housing Amendment. Another question that came up was if a person specifically asks for the makeup, the makeup of a neighborhood, demographics of a neighborhood. For instance, we had a person come over from LA who wanted to know where the best part, where the most Korean people located in this town. With that request in writing and with a peek at letting our broker know, we went ahead and pulled the statistics for who lives where. And we were able to provide those off the public record. So you can occasionally, by using good documented information, you cannot just decide that a part of town or a person belongs a certain place because you are perceiving them or the seller is perceiving them in a particular way. One of the forms that they reminded us to use, and I'm sorry I didn't write it down more carefully, and I know it, I just don't use it very often. There's a summary of the offer form available. I think it says summary to multiple counteroffer or summary of counteroffer, or summary of offer, where you have literally just said price, terms, how fast I can close, what benefits or things I'm going to need or I'm able to do for you in exchange for acceptance of our offer. That this summary does eliminate any visuals of what kind of person may or may not be making the offer, and they're suggesting that we consider using the summary form. I would like to go through just only to show you what's here. Examples of unlawful or improper conduct based on a class, refusing to negotiate due to a person's protected status. I just don't want X number of that type of person in the neighborhood. You just can't, you can't do that. Refusing to show, rent, sell, channeling or steering, block busting or causing a panic selling, which is that a neighborhood is disintegrating and therefore you should probably get out now. Making any statement or advertisement that indicates a preference, a limitation, or a discrimination. That includes saying that it may be a great home for a person in a wheelchair because we are all single, you know, there's no steps, that sort of thing. So they're reminding you that positive and negative comments are to be avoided here. Inquiring about protected characteristics, asking if they're married, asking if they have children, asking if they're planning on having children anytime soon, using criminal history, failing to access financial standards, using the same financial standards. I had a brush with this myself a year or so ago. I did a rental agreement for a homeowner that had bought the home from me many years ago and was going to need to rent it now. We got about 10 or 12 applications. One of the applications, as it turned out, and I did not know until after we had accepted another renter, was transgender. And he filed a complaint and said that we chose him based on the fact that we didn't want a transgender person in that home. First of all, I'm speaking for myself because I reviewed them. I had no idea that person was transgendered. And since I keep all that kind of material, and this is a good example about why you should keep old offers and things, I was able to demonstrate that that person hadn't had any money in their bank for 6 months and had a 400 credit score. So under no way, shape, or form had we chosen that person based on, I didn't even know they were transgendered. But there was a complaint filed and we did have to answer it, and I was able to show the bank statements and things that were presented and demonstrate that we chose the person who could afford to live there, not we didn't fail to choose him because, or her, I forget which pronoun she preferred, because they were transgender. So it sneaks up on you. You don't think it's going to happen to you, and it does. Can we slide up a little further, Tommy? Harassing people, refusing to permit reasonable accommodations. This was another one that if you've taken your continuing education lately, one of the test questions was whether a disabled tenant is allowed to install at his own expense certain equipment to make the home more comfortable for him. You cannot stop them from doing that. You don't have to pay for it, but you cannot stop them from putting in what they need. Some examples of positive practices were that you're using the objective same property selection criteria, location, property features, terms, the same ones across the board. This was a similar conversation that we had at the beginning of the year about COVID, when if someone had COVID and had recovered, people are shunning them on the not wanting them in the home, that sort of thing. So we had some of that as well. The same courtesy you give people you're comfortable with is the same courtesy you should be giving people you aren't as comfortable with, and learning how to say and not ask things that are not appropriate for your conversation are very important. Can we slide up this little? So there's some resources there, and then there's some limited exceptions. As you see, an owner of a residential property with 4 units can decide that a person may not, they don't want a registered sex offender living where there's children, that sort of thing. They can make those kinds of decisions, but they can't do it if they're not living there. So what we got out of this no buyers, I was very surprised when I went on to take the class, and it was a long discussion about bias, and some of you may be experiencing that as well with me this morning or this afternoon. The point of eliminating buyer's letters and doing it across the board is that you conduct yourself the same way every time. So in the MLS, you're going to say, and you're going to discuss with your seller when you hit this form. It's one of my favorite tips I give all the time. I use CAR forms as a mental checklist. So when I hit the fair housing form, I'm not thinking how quickly to get their signature. I'm reminding myself that, oh, I need to stop and tell them that certain people may be interested in their home, and that they may have a perceived or unperceived bias about. And second of all, that they may get a letter from the people, and that the best practice is to avoid reading those letters and make a decision. Now, if a seller says he wants to see them, you have to note which files you had it on and when, and if they saw them, and you have to keep some record of it. You can't just let them willy-nilly come through when on a recent listing, a friend told me they got 20 or 25 offers. 7 of them had letters and the rest didn't. One of the things CAR mentions is, if you don't write a letter, does that mean you don't want the home as bad as the people who wrote the letters? That necessarily isn't true either. And so you want to get it in the MLS as to whether you are accepting them. If your seller indicates he does want to see them, then you have to make a clear record in your transaction that he was asked and answered that he does want to see the letter and that he's been warned about fair housing. One of the rules that that I repeat always kind of blows realtors out of the water is one of the first, on your very first real estate test, you were asked if you are faced with a violation, if somebody's instructing you to violate the law, what must you do? And it literally says come to a full stop. You must not participate any further, even if that means giving up the transaction. Obviously, we don't normally have to go that far. We take it to our broker and somebody else steps in, and there's ways of doing this. But you have to be, going forward, when you hit the Fair Housing Amendment that's now attached to 20 different agreements, you want to be giving a lot of thought to how to advise your buyers and your sellers regarding these letters. And that it is a violation to discriminate, and that this is an attempt, like we were all making this year, to up our game a little bit in our sensitivity of these real and and often unconscious biases that cause us to make decisions that are not being made for the pure financial benefit. That pretty much wraps up what I had to say to you. CAR is asking for an across-the-board elimination of these letters. Because they are not illegal, you will have to discuss with your seller whether you want to receive them or not receive them. If they say they do not want to see them, they do need to be separated out, even if they come in the middle of the package and pulled out. If you are unable to remove the letter for some reason, you are allowed to return the package to the buying side and tell them to remove it and resend the package. So it is a way to, if a client's forcing your hand on a buyer's letter and the seller has indicated that he does not want to see them or that he will follow your counsel and not read them, that the entire offer can be rejected for the pulling of that letter. So that does it for me. Are there questions I can answer about this? Tommy, what you think about all this?
I have a question. So if CAR is saying that letters are okay as long as you're consistent with it and you say whether or not you'll accept them or not, are they given specifics of what you should be instructing your clients to put in the letter?
That's what's in this. That's why this fair housing is attached to everything. It will, the things you might think to write in a letter, you're going to find are protected classes. You know, it's a house and I'm going to have 10 people living there. You know, a person may not want 10 people living there. People care about their homes and they don't necessarily want them torn up even once they're gone. So this form talks about the protected classes up at the top and the types of
so I guess my question expands from that. Yeah. So I guess it expands from that because obviously, you know, your client's going to see this this form, right?
Yep.
Your client's going to read through this form. Your client's going to sign this form.
Yep.
And then let's say that a letter or the MLS posting says letters are accepted. So your client writes a letter. And when you read the letter, you feel it violates some of this based on the verbiage. How do you handle that as an agent?
You're going to need to document that you brought to the attention that this letter violates gender identity or sexual orientation or familial status. Like I said, that there's going to be 2 dads or there's going to be 2 moms. This is a very clear breach of a familial status. So again, CAR is hoping to lead us away from allowing these letters at all, them in our files at all. But once they're there, you would have no choice. Just like I said at the end here a moment ago, you would have no choice but to stand up for the fair housing.
Yeah, because they're walking a fine line, right? They're saying we don't want you to discriminate, but then again, they don't want to come out and say you just can't do it because then it violates rights as well.
Like I said, the conversation I had with one of the TCs when I posted this class, you know, and she indicated so strongly that she had worked her way up on her own as a single mom, and you know, she really wanted to see that she had been a success and all that. And I posed one question: what if they think that you did something wrong to become a single mom? Maybe they don't know what your situation was, and they think you've been foolish in some way. I said, if it worked for you I think that's the advice I'd give to buyers. If it worked for you in fact, I said this to her in the closing of our conversation on the TC page. If it worked for you all the time, there wouldn't be a problem. It's that it doesn't work for you all the time. That's the problem. So I hope I answered that. You're going to, most people, the most common letter I see is that we're a sweet little family with a baby.
Right.
And that sweet little family often means a traditional mom and dad situation. And if you laid identical letters, in fact, this is probably a good test. I probably bet somebody's done this. If you laid the same letter side by side with 2 different pictures, Would that be enough to?
Okay, so now you just open up a whole nother side of it, is pictures. Are they saying it's legal to attach a picture to that letter? Because I've heard I've heard
saying
both
it's
ways.
common, and many people do it. And I have to say that even as far along as I am in my career, and how I feel about fair housing and being in real estate and so long and being careful of steering and that sort of stuff, I still think I was very surprised to hear the examples Carr gave about how built in our biases are, and that we just need to draw a line in the sand and start fresh here. And so if they said, you looked at the same letter and they said, I think I prefer the more traditional family for this neighborhood because there's a school down on the corner, it would have to be pointed out to them, and you would have to document that their choice was not necessarily completely financial.
Well, that's what brings up that whole picture scenario, and if that's legal or not, is if you took both letters side by side and it said, you know, we're a young family with 2 kids, et cetera, and you read those side by side, you would never know if one was traditional and one was not, right?
Right.
But if there's a picture there, then you can make a biased decision based on that. And
one of the agents that I helped recently had a garage sale at the same time that they had their home, because they were selling everything. They're downsizing, so they thought great time to have a garage sale. Well, we've got 30 buyers going through their house. Mm-hmm. So many of these buyers pitched on site about themselves. And then later asked the agent to remind them that they had purchased a large piece of something. Remember, I'm the person who bought the car, or remind me to tell them that I'm the person who was interested in the RV. These are also violations in that it takes anything off the terms of the transaction. Mm-hmm. So the fact that you bought their car should not endear them to you any more than a guy with a similar.
Right. It's different than saying, in a listing, all furniture is for sale within the house. House is, able to be purchased, fully furnished, things like that, because it has to do with the house itself. And you may go in and say, I love the furniture, I'm willing to buy it. Right. Or yes, I do want it fully furnished. But it was disclosed up front. I can't take the
furniture because it doesn't fit my family. That includes my disabled,
right.
et cetera, et cetera.
Or if it was something that benefited the house, yet it was something that could be removed, right? I.e., a refrigerator, right? Washer and dryer. Things like this that can be disclosed up front that says, hey, they fit perfect and we built something around them. If you don't have this exact washer or dryer, it's probably not going to fit very well. So therefore, we're willing to include them in the sale, but it's disclosed up front and not so much, hey, remember I was the one that said I'd be interested in purchasing that if we got the house, right? Or something like that. And I think a lot of it, when you look at this, a lot of it really comes down to just how you verbalize that letter, right? Because you can get your point across, you can say the same exact thing without going into specific details of where it violates this box here in number 4, right?
For instance, you would like to be in that school district, not how many kids you do or do not have, or why you're actually going to be a teacher in that school district. You're not even going to send any kids to that school district. So,
well, let's use your single mother as a perfect example. Somebody writes a letter and says, young family, this is our first home purchase. I have 2 kids, blah, 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 versus young family, our first home purchase, 2 kids. Would you know if one's married and one is single?
Right.
You're still a family, right? Regardless, you're still a family. Single mother and kids is a family. Married couple and kids is a family. So, I think a lot of it is how you write it. It's the whole picture thing that gets me caught up. And the only reason it's getting me caught up is because we had the CRMLS guy on that talked about violations, and pictures was a big deal in that mix. And I'm just thinking back to that conversation going, how is this not a violation then if you're throwing a picture in there? But I guess because it's not attached to the MLS, it's a whole different scenario.
And to speak personally for a moment, I think this year has been an eye-opener for many types of persons in the world. Even, I'm a baby boomer. I was part of school busing. I saw all the things. I saw the Civil Rights Act. I was around for those kinds of things. And so I did not perceive myself in any way of having, in fact, I thought I was, this class really opened my eyes to the kind of biases that we are accidentally carrying around in our brain, and that there has to be a more active participation at neutralizing those things, especially when it comes to home ownership.
Absolutely.
Certainly, just being a human is certainly the first one, but home ownership is where it positively should be term for term, and not based on that you would not prefer to have a homosexual couple over a family in your home. All families look very different today than they looked when we were all younger. And
yep.
I couldn't help but feel that this really helped me focus my goals this year on putting away biases and being able to notice them a lot quicker.
Yeah, I mean, bottom line is it shouldn't come into play, and the negative side to, and it's not this industry, it's every industry, is it does come into play, even though it shouldn't, right? And
in my situation,
I think the moral of the story is directed at the agents, and agents play a big part in this. One, of explaining this fair housing discriminatory advisory. That's where it starts. But I mean, I would say, as if I'm looking back and I say, okay, I'm an agent and I sit down with a client that wants to sell, and I go through this, and the client starts going and saying, I'm not willing to sell my house to X, Y, and Z. Thank you. We're not the right fit, right?
Or you are attempting to dual agency a transaction, and you mention that you have a nice family for this home,
right?
Versus you have a qualified buyer for this home.
Yeah, I think it's the notion of, like, if you haven't read through this word for word, this document, you need to, right? You need to understand it. And I would just say is you need to be cautious when it comes to a time of putting yourself as an agent and your client in a situation where you're going to write a letter. And if that's the case, write it with the notion that hits on the points you want to emphasize without giving anybody the ability to, even in the back of their mind, discriminate against you, right? Because there are going to be those people out there in this world. That's just how, it's the world we're living in right now, unfortunately. And
you're running through my mind trying to think what a good one would look like. And for a moment, I thought to myself, maybe how long you've been on your job, but employment, sources of income is a protected class.
And not only that, I mean, you either qualify or you don't. It's not like the seller, in most cases, is not going to be carrying your note. So, ultimately, that doesn't, let's be honest, most sellers, right, that are selling their house have in the back of their mind is like, hey, I built this, I've taken care of this house to where it is today. And I cherish this house. Even though I want to move out of state, even though I want to move up or move down or live at the beach or whatever reason for me selling this house, ultimately they want it to go to somebody who is going to love it as much as them, right? Very few of the sellers are selling because they just despise their neighbors. They despise the neighborhood. Negative things have happened to them and they just want out. Most enjoyed living where they're at. And they're just moving for other reasons. So putting a perspective into that is, could you write a letter that, stipulates why you love the house, right? Why you love the neighborhood, things like that, without going into specifics that are outlined in this box here in section 4. I mean, yeah, you could very easily. And the notion is, write your letter however you want to write it, and then proofread it with this in front of you and say, at any point, am I pinpointing one of these topics? And if so, it's really just a rewording that gets you through it. It's not a notion of having
that,
to
like we
remove
always do, you speak to your broker if you get one that's violating, that you bring them in on it so that they're aware that you're about to reject over. You're going to have to cut the letter out of the.
I mean, there's more and more agents.
When I was a broker a lot, I would tell people to blame me all the time. When I was a broker, I said blame me. So that's kind of where they're going with this one as well. And you see it a lot.
You see it a lot in MLS. You see it a lot that says no letters accepted. And a lot is because they don't want to put themselves, or they don't want to put their clients in a situation where it potentially can backfire on them as well. Because ultimately, like you just said, you didn't expect ever to get hit on something, and all of a sudden somebody says, you're discriminating against me when you didn't even know. And you're like, whoa, now I have to react to this and explain why we overlooked this individual. Well, I mean, when you accept letters, and let's just say that you get 10 offers, there's a good portion of those that'll probably have a letter. And then somebody doesn't get an offer accepted, and you don't give an explanation as far as why, and all you say is, they chose to go with a better suited offer. That's pretty vague. And you may rattle some feathers, right? Give me a reason why. Was my offer that far off? I thought I gave a clean offer. I thought it was well over asking. I told you that, when I told my agent when you sent it, and my agent told you that we want to be included in any counters because we really love the house and we feel that this is a strong offer. And then all of a sudden you don't even get a counter. Yeah, people get, especially in this market right now, as tough as it is, clients are getting to a point where, and I've heard it a couple times, like, okay, great. Well, I gave you a contract, have your client sign it and send the rejection to me. So I want to make sure it was presented right. So, you just are walking the tightrope, and make sure that if your clients are doing it, that you're reading it, right? You're there ultimately to protect your client.
There is a presumption as well that you will benefit from just by having this form in your package, that you've discussed it and that it's on the table, which is the overriding reason CAR decided to add it to all the documents. Your personal conduct, they can't necessarily manage as well as they can what goes in your automatic packages. So in your automatic package now is an opportunity to remind people that the world is changing and that a well-qualified buyer may not look like they used to, or how you perceive them to be. They may be a very different.
And I think that's more important than anything,
because very different from you, or very like you. Could be either way.
Right. I think it's more of like, the second round. The individuals may not be who you perceive you want to be the ones to live in the property, but it's not about that. It's about the best offer that's the right offer, and not based on perception, And I mean, that opens up another can, is like, sellers at the home when it's being shown and things like that, same kind of concept. Right. It's almost like an in-person letter, right?
Which this client, this agent that I'm helping with their escrow, essentially did, because they had 30 people, the same 30 people who were looking at the house did the garage sale with them, and they had an opportunity to meet people and get to know them. And there were, like I said, the agent was reminded to tell them that I'm the one that bought the X, or that I'm the, right. So they were definitely trying to get a leg up in any way they could. And in that case, they had met the buyer, they had met the seller. Yeah. So they felt that they had an opportunity because they had at least met the seller. So
I always tell people the only way these boxes and these documents get smaller and smaller and smaller is if we all kind of work on it, right? It's
I
not going
joke all the
away.
time that the most important boxes on car are the smallest.
Look, 10 years ago, and there was only half of this stuff was listed. Not even half, a quarter of it was listed.
Right.
And, you know, so this protected class is definitely getting larger and larger within the fair housing rules and regulations. And it's getting there because of things that happen, right? And as long as they continue to happen, this continues to grow. So when we start working on it and it starts moving back, that things get better. So
if you get a chance, take a look at that Newsday link I put in there where they show you they actually show you the videos of the discrimination by realtors and how easily you can stumble into it. These are not, I've almost said jackasses, but these are not people who went into that appointment to be violators of fair housing. They have either a unconscious bias or an actual bias, and it was videoed. And the people who are discriminated against fell into very clear protected classes.
was there anything in this document that you wanted to go through?
You know, after I double checked it today, I thought going directly to the fair housing form was more useful than anything in here. In fact, I kind of fell in love with the fair housing addendum after I compared them to this PowerPoint to the actual document. So
Gotcha.
it covers the same kinds of things that I was talking about, that, you know, the wedding photo or a flag flying out front or a type of car that they drive or what color they painted their house.
Mm-hmm. Political affiliation, right?
The protected classes again. When I took the class from CAR, they gave you this PowerPoint, but then they referred to the fair housing addendum so much that when I cross-checked my own notes this morning, I decided to go the same way and sort of just work off the fair housing addendum.
Gotcha.
And again, I was surprised to get a lecture in bias as well. However, afterwards, my eyes were really open to how easily these letters, by the way, have always been known to be frowned upon. For those who've been around the industry a long time, it was already known that these could potentially have flaws that you would want to avoid. This just makes it now very clear that you're going to want to avoid these, because there are more and more buyers who don't look like a nuclear family of, you know, 1950s or 60s.
Well, and I see, you know, a lot of agents, like I said, they just cut it off completely and say letter's not accepted. Why? Ultimately, they don't want to put themselves in a situation either. You know, you can lead your clients. You can teach and mentor and coach your clients, but your client will do what your client wants to do, right? And so ultimately, you put yourself at risk as well as an agent in some cases where you don't want to be included, but you're tied to that, right? So, i.e. like you know, somebody came up and said, you guys discriminated against me because of X. No, that wasn't why we didn't pick your offer. We picked it because you had a 400 credit score and no money in the bank for 6 months. You know, and we had somebody that was, you know, a couple $100,000 in the bank and a 800 credit score that we felt would be able to close the deal and move forward. So, you know,
I actually felt in that case that they were trying a form of reverse discrimination, which was to force us to accept a lesser qualified person based on their protected status. So it was an odd experience to have, especially when you first open the letter, because you positively did not mean to make that person feel that way, and so it's kind of shocking when you get accused of it as well.
I would say this slide right here is the most important slide in there, right?
Yep.
You know, what if my buyer wants to write a letter to be submitted an offer? Okay, first make sure that the letter's not prohibited within the MLS. So if it says nothing, it's not prohibited, right? If so, inform buyer. If not prohibited in the MLS, advise the buyer to focus on matters that do not involve any protected class or characteristics, i.e. revert them back to the form, and then recommend that the letter be reviewed by the broker or counsel. You know, I think it's just being aware, making sure that everybody understands, and as long as an agent you do that and you inform and make sure that everybody's aware, then you're good. You know, I would say is that you just want to make sure that you have documentation with that it's not always verbal conversations, right? So you want to follow it up with documentation that goes in the file. And that's where that form plays the biggest part. All right, cool. So should we open it up for any questions then too?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Do that. So, I know we got a dozen people up in here. Did anybody have any questions for Mary Jane in regards to what she just covered?
I have a comment.
Yeah.
I noticed on the FHDA form that, and I thought I would just point that out, that on paragraph 10E, it shows the CAR acronym for the form to help compare multiple offers.
Thank you. That's excellent. Thank you for that handy notice. It is 10E, Form SUM-MO, which is the summary document that you can use to create, that the buyer or seller could use to stay away from anything that isn't a term of the transaction. Good point. Thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
If I could also say that I like to see, I'm a TC, by the way. When I get the emails forwarded to me from the buyer's agent for, let's say my agent has the listing, where they do bullet points about the strengths of the offer. You know, I like that because you don't have to, you know, the one thing I particularly like is when they say, I've included a pre-qual letter, but just so you know, I've worked with this loan officer or this company for 10 years. They've never not closed a loan. That just helps to strengthen the offer. And I thought that sounded like it was acceptable, but, you know.
They had so many good examples that I'm not going to pretend to be that great on my feet that I could positively, but that does sound to me like your lender's capabilities would be something that is not a protected class. So I would tend to agree with you. When you listen to the car attorneys do it, though, you kind of get split sometimes. So I do agree with you, but in general, buyer's letters now are cautionary tales.
Yeah. Cool. Any other questions or comments or examples?
Oh, can I, sorry to monopolize this, but I want to tell you about a buyer's letter that my agent submitted. This was a few months ago before the FHDA form came out. But it was a case where the buyer was a young guy. He was only like 30, but he did this very poignant letter about he had married the love of his life, and unfortunately she died of cancer, you know, from breast cancer, and I'm moving into this area and this home is perfect for me because it's within blocks of where my parents live, and just to have the support of family during this time. And it really, I mean, the listing agent said, my sellers want to, you know, that touched them. And I thought, you know, I guess that would violate the familial class. But it made a difference, you know, because they wanted to help this young man who had gone through something.
I would have I would have wondered if the terms were similar to another, or you can ice that cake if his terms are the best as well,
Mhm.
or if you counter him into the best position.
Yeah, he was a very qualified buyer on his own, you know, and I think all of the offers were with a loan, and you know, it's not like you're comparing an all cash offer to a financed deal, but I think that tipped it over the edge for the sellers, that you know, they wanted to help out this young man. But
Yeah.
I thought, oh, I need to make sure I tell my agent, you know, this sort of thing is allowed, really.
Especially for the transaction coordinators who are passing docs along on DocuSign for signatures and things, you're going to have clear instructions as to whether you want them, whether your agent wants you to pull that letter out of there before they go for signature.
Okay. Well, I'm usually not involved at that point. You know, my agent has already submitted the offer. It's either gotten approved or not, and then I get
Occasionally,
sent.
though, you're familiar with people continuing to counter without backing up and signing the original offer that they wrote in the first place, and then they might have you clean up a transaction by where here's the counter, it's a deal, but now send out the offer to finish up, maybe on the seller side, and you include the letter where it looks like the seller may have had a chance to review that letter. So just an additional consider. I own a TC company, and I had a TC career for a long time. I'm very sensitive to TCs getting drug in getting named in transactions that they shouldn't have any part of. So that just that triggered a bias in me toward toward transaction coordinators.
Okay, I'm done.
Happy to hear from you, Kathleen.
No worries.
Thank you for joining us.
All right. Any other questions? Thank you. Yeah, and just a heads up, guys. So in the chat, if you guys click on chat at the bottom of your screen and open up chat, you'll see that there's a few links there. One is a link to last week, the Newsday link that Mary Jane was just talking about for you guys to read on your own. And then there's another link to a YouTube channel where all these recordings are going. So if you miss a week or you want to go back and rewatch these, if you may have shown up a few minutes later, what have you, you can go back and watch those. That's where they're getting posted. So feel free to, go to those links and take a look at them, like them, favorite them, so that you can go back to them if you end up missing a week or what have you. But, we hold the Zoom and Learns every week on Wednesday at 12:30, the same time, same link. Mary Jane, next week?
I am not seeing that we have a topic for next week, but you and I will work on that immediately following the meeting like we usually do.
Okay.
Do you have on the 18th the new laws that are going to affect real estate for you? So I'd like to suggest that for the 18th. And then December, once in December, we're going to have the CRMLS girl back to really show you how to use your dashboard. And I'll have new forms up and ready and running for you. So, my suggestion for next week was going to be procuring cause, if you're interested in procuring cause.
Okay, yeah, let's do it.
Subject. It's a really frustrating subject, and I want to run you through what your broker must say to you every time you bring us a procuring cause situation, and how to increase your odds of winning on those procuring causes, because they're a long shot going in. And so if procuring cause was one I had an idea for, and then new laws the week after that. And then are we doing one on the 25th, which is the day before Thanksgiving?
I'd say no.
Okay. All right, so that would take me into my December schedule, and then you and I'll get that all sorted out. I'm
I
very.
mean, I've already heard from countless people that they plan on doing stuff that week with,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
the kids don't have anything going on that week and things like that, that they're going to be doing other things. So
I usually follow the Temecula Murrieta schedule for school schedule for holidays, and I take a small break at spring break, and I take a small break at summer because people just can't get to their computers in those times. So that seems like a good week to.
For those of you that did come in late and you don't see the chats before that you came in, I did repost the YouTube channel, did repost Mary Jane's link to Newsday as well. So anybody that's on right now is going to see that. So feel free to take a look at that. And if you guys have any questions with any past shows that we had or Zoom and Learns that we had, you can reach out to either one of us at any time. We're here as a resource for you. So, you know, use us.
Classes are available to be booked directly for your benefit as well. If you want to take them to your offices, if you want to take them to your clients, if you want to have a Zoom and Learn of your own, we're there to repeat any of them for you. Do them in person, although safely, been masked up and in certain types of environments. But all of these classes are repeatable at any level. And frankly, that includes you calling me and telling me I'm in a jam. Tell me now what you said yesterday. So one person, 200, we can make it happen.
Yep. All right, very well. Looks like everybody had messaged up in the chat, so I think everybody has access to those. And we look forward to seeing you guys all next week. Again, same time, same link, same Zoom. So we look
you know,
forward to
the
seeing you
11th
all.
is the 11th is a holiday, right? It's Veterans Day.
Oh yeah, you're right. That Tommy and I'll talk about that after, because we've got 3 classes that day. So as it turns out, I haven't had to them up. So
All right, so we may not do the 11th. We'll let you know on that one. And
18th, I'll be back with new laws for you, and you guys can suggest subjects to us too if it's bothering you or something's come up a lot in your world. Feel free to suggest a topic.
Yeah, absolutely. That's how it all started, was agents suggesting certain things. But
that's the way I try to do it. But
all right, beautiful. Well, unless anybody has any other questions, I don't see anything else in the chat in regards to questions. So I will say thank you guys for joining us. And we will definitely put out some information on social media in regards to next week and the following week. Well, the 18th, we know it's going to be new rules and regulations. So, all right, guys, thank you very much for taking the time out of your day to join us. We greatly appreciate it. Hope you learned something.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
bye.